Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Barbara Maybe Abel. There are books and films that help teach ways to confront criminals and appropriate behavior during kidnappings or critical situations. However, reading about these scenarios and actually experiencing them are two different things. Barbara Abel fully realized this when one of the most dangerous criminals in the U.S. showed up at her doorstep. On November 14, 1974, a scared Dale ran to his neighbor's house and began knocking frantically on the door. When the neighbor opened it, he found the boy covered in blood with strange marks on his ankles. Dale explained that the marks were from ropes used by an unknown man who had tied him and his Aunt Beverly while his mother, Barbara, was kidnapped. The neighbor quickly called 911. When the police arrived at the Abel family's home, it looked like a crime scene. There was blood everywhere, and the neighbor noted that Barbara's car was missing, along with her. Dale assisted the detectives by providing details about his mother, 31-year-old Barbara Maybe Abel, who had a twin sister named Beverly, who had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. The twin sisters shared a deep bond from childhood. Barbara consistently supported and cared for Beverly. As they grew older, their relationship became stronger, with Barbara always striving to improve Beverly's quality of life and help her manage daily challenges. Barbara was smart, cheerful, and serious when necessary. After their father passed away, young Barbara took on many household responsibilities to help her mother. Throughout her life, she maintained a positive outlook and supported her loved ones during tough times. In April 1968, she gave birth to her son, Dale, and felt immense joy as a new mother. However, she soon faced challenges, primarily due to her breakup with the baby's father. Their disagreements had begun about a year before Dale was born. Although they hoped Dale would help resolve their issues, things only got worse. Ultimately, Barbara chose to raise her son as a single mother, later reflecting that this was the right decision for both of them, as it allowed her to create a stable environment for herself and her child. Unfortunately, the family faced a series of challenges. In May 1974, their mother passed away from an illness, leaving them in shock. It felt as if their world had collapsed. Their family had always been very close, so their mother's death deeply affected both Barbara and Beverly. Despite their grief, they tried to maintain a normal environment for the younger generation. Barbara worked diligently, writing and taking a job at a radio station, while Beverly managed household chores. They lived in a modest home in Palm Beach, Florida, and surrounded 6-year-old Dale with love and care, gradually recovering from this tragedy. On November 14, 1974, it seemed like an ordinary day for the Abel family. Beverly assisted Barbara in getting ready for work, and Dale was preparing for school. After dropping Dale off, Barbara went to the radio station where she worked as a news editor. Around noon, she tried to call Beverly, who was at home, but there was no answer. This was strange because Beverly never missed calls. She was always eager to talk, but this time she didn't even call back. Initially, Barbara thought her sister might have fallen asleep and didn't think much of it, so she continued with her work. After leaving the radio station around 5 p.m., she picked up Dale and headed home, expecting to see her sister there. As soon as they entered, she called Beverly, but there was no answer. Barbara asked her son to find his aunt, thinking she might have been listening to music and hadn't heard them come home. While Barbara went to the kitchen, she felt a sudden and intense fear that sent a chill down her spine. It was a deep, instinctual dread, and in that moment, she heard a voice say, "Don't turn around or I'll attack." Just then, her son Dale rushed into the kitchen and said that his aunt was in the bedroom and bleeding. When Barbara turned around, she saw a man pointing a weapon at her and Dale. Staying calm, she told the intruder that she needed to see her twin sister because she was worried about her. This was a risky move, but it seemed to impress the man, who agreed to let her see her sister. With the weapon still aimed at them, Barbara and Dale cautiously walked toward the bedroom, trying to keep Dale away from the armed man. Beverly was in the bedroom, lying on the bed with a gag in her mouth, crying. Barbara kissed her sister and whispered that everything would be all right. Barbara noticed that Beverly was undressed under the blanket. Unable to hold back her feelings, she confronted the attacker, questioning whether he had abused Beverly. He responded with laughter, claiming he had attempted to assault Beverly but had failed. His cruel smile and taunting words sent another chill down Barbara's spine. Following this, she tried to bribe the assailant. She revealed that she had a significant amount of money at home and was willing to give him her car keys. In return, she pleaded with him to leave them alone and not to harm them. The stranger, however, expressed his desire to take her child and reach for the boy. Barbara firmly declared that she would never give up her son and instead offered to take Dale's place. The man agreed. The assailant identified himself as Paul John Knowles and claimed he had just escaped from prison, stating he had no plans to return. He warned Barbara that he wouldn't harm her as long as she followed his orders exactly. Although Barbara knew he was lying and likely wouldn't let her go easily, she felt she had no good options left. Her primary concern was the safety of her son and her injured sister, who needed help. However, Paul was determined to keep them as hostages to buy time for his escape. He tightly bound Dale's and Beverly's hands and feet on the bed. Barbara was horrified at the thought of leaving her loved ones in such a vulnerable state, but she realized that any resistance could endanger their lives. Throughout this terrifying situation, she remained calm, speaking to her family as if everything was normal, reassuring them that it would all be over soon and that they would be all right. This approach worked. She managed to soothe her child and keep the kidnapper from becoming agitated. Barbara emphasized that they should not provoke Paul, as she had no way of knowing his true intentions. Her goal was to lead the attacker far away from her home and loved ones, then find a way to escape and alert the authorities. Paul accepted the offered money and car keys. He pointed the weapon at Barbara, then got into the car and drove away. Throughout this time, Barbara was primarily concerned about her family. More than 30 minutes later, Dale escaped and sought help. The police responded to the call. They found an abandoned car near the house, which was the vehicle used by the kidnapper. The car was registered in one state, but its license plate had been stolen from another location. Investigations revealed that the car had been stolen from a man named William Bates a couple of months earlier. Eventually, William's body was discovered, strangled, in Ohio. Inside the car's glove compartment, detectives discovered numerous credit cards and insurance policies, the majority of which belonged to Carswell Carr. The man had become a victim of a double homicide along with his 15-year-old daughter, Amanda, just days before Barbara's kidnapping. The tragedy at the Carr home in Milledgeville, Georgia, was one of the most horrifying scenes the investigators had ever witnessed. A 15-year-old girl had been brutally strangled, and her father had suffered around 30 stab wounds. It was evident that the perpetrator was a dangerous individual, prepared to kill anyone who interfered. On November 6, 1974, the Carr home, located almost 7 kilometers from where Barbara lived, was found ransacked. Inside the car, discovered near the home of Barbara, a will belonging to a man named Paul John Knowles was also found. Once law enforcement checked their database, they identified Paul as an escaped serial killer. Authorities linked him to at least 35 murders across the United States. He traveled aimlessly, leaving behind trails of blood and bodies, completely indifferent to the consequences of his actions. He selected his victims randomly, unlike most psychopaths, who usually target a specific type. He took lives with the same pleasure, whether the victim was a child or an adult. He left behind a lot of evidence, but there were no hints about his next actions. Meanwhile, Barbara and Paul were driving Barbara's car when he discovered he was wanted by the police. He forced Barbara to change the radio station. She complied and noticed that he seemed to expect the news to be on all channels, while others remained quiet, which frustrated him. At that moment, she was still unaware of his true nature. Suddenly, he confessed to having killed several people. This made Barbara uncomfortable, so she tried to change the topic to distract him from his violent past by discussing the weather, movies, or anything unrelated. Despite her attempts, he continued to casually mention his killings. Barbara began to act flirtatiously, realizing that her femininity might be her only chance for escape. Barbara decided to try to win him over. She called him sweet and offered him a cigarette. When Paul asked why she was being so nice, Barbara replied that she didn't believe he was a bad person, and even said he reminded her of the famous actor Robert Redford. This seemed to work. After the comparison, Paul became much more responsive, calm, and easier to talk to. They continued their conversation as if nothing bad had happened, as if they were simply on a date. Paul asked Barbara what she did for a living. She replied that she was a news editor on the radio and dreamed of writing a book. This excited Paul, who seemed genuinely interested in her ambitions, especially the idea that she could write a book about him. He expressed a desire to become famous, mentioning that he wanted the book's proceeds to go to his mother, but he didn't specify how he planned to achieve that fame. He repeatedly claimed to have killed many times. Although she was terrified, Barbara tried to hide her fear and remain calm. At one point, she realized that her only chance to escape was to push Paul out of the moving car, but she couldn't summon the strength or courage to do it. Barbara understood that if the investigators discovered who she was with, they would likely conclude that she was already dead. Paul was a ruthless predator with an insatiable thirst for killing. He was unpredictable and armed, which made him extremely dangerous. The most frightening aspect was that they were in an unknown location, and she had no idea where Paul was taking her. The detectives discovered that he was traveling between different states, often switching cars, and that his attacks consistently resulted in death. Occasionally, he took hostages, all of whom ended up dead. The chances of Barbara surviving her abduction were deemed very slim, but her family and friends refused to give up hope. They believed she could still be found alive. Law enforcement officials realized they had to act quickly because with every minute that passed, the likelihood of rescuing Barbara decreased. A search perimeter was set up on the roads in West Palm Beach, along with checkpoints. Authorities announced plans to intercept the suspect, Paul, focusing on Barbara's distinctive golden vehicle. However, detectives were unaware that they were too late. Paul had already taken Barbara beyond the checkpoints. Paul arrived with Barbara at a motel in Fort Pierce, about 100 kilometers from the scene of the abduction. He intended to rest there for the night and had no plans to release Barbara. To avoid suspicion, they registered as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, pretending to be on their honeymoon. Barbara felt that the hotel receptionist was suspicious of them based on her gaze. Meanwhile, she knew that Paul was carrying a weapon at his waist. To allay the receptionist's suspicions, Barbara embraced Paul and acted like a loving wife. This successfully convinced the administrator, who then handed them the key to the room. As soon as they entered the room, Paul ordered Barbara to take off her clothes. Barbara felt scared and protested, saying she was too tired, but Paul ignored her and insisted she comply. While the criminal was trying to do his dirty deed, she thought of everything that came to mind about her son and sister in order to detach herself from what was happening, but at first, she couldn't manage it. Paul grew frustrated and angry, becoming aggressive toward her. Sensing his loss of control, Barbara calmly asked him what he was trying to accomplish, which helped ease his anger momentarily. However, he later abused her. At one point, he shared with her that he had two personalities, referring to them as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, explaining his frequent mood changes. Barbara found it hard to predict his rapid shifts in temperament. After a brief period of calm, Paul suddenly ripped the bed sheets, tied Barbara up with them, and threw her onto the bed before turning on the television. Exhausted both mentally and physically, she eventually fell asleep. In her dreams, Barbara saw her deceased mother, who reassured her that everything would be fine. At that moment, Barbara understood it was a sign and resolved to do whatever it took to save herself. While she slept, she heard news reports and saw Paul intently watching a broadcast that displayed her photographs alongside those of Paul, his identity had already been established. They also reported on other crimes committed by Paul that were known at that time. Barbara was horrified. She understood that her chances of rescue were extremely low. Meanwhile, Paul reveled in the attention he was receiving from the media. Barbara recognized that he desperately wanted to become famous. Later, Paul went to sleep, tying his leg to Barbara's to prevent her from escaping. By November 15, the police still had no leads on her whereabouts. The search for Paul had escalated to a national scale. Headlines in all newspapers and on television shouted that the most dangerous criminal in the country was killing again. Barbara woke up in the morning next to Paul. She had barely slept the entire night, terrified to be tied to one of America's most wanted criminals. Paul took her to the nearest diner for breakfast. While he eagerly devoured scrambled eggs, toast, pancakes, and orange juice, Barbara couldn't eat anything. She glanced around nervously, hoping someone would recognize her, while also looking for ways to escape. However, she quickly noticed that Paul's weapon was aimed at her. He warned her not to make any sudden movements. To her dismay, she realized that no one seemed to recognize them, despite the extensive news coverage and radio alerts. Barbara understood that she couldn't rely on anyone for help. She was too scared to scream or ask for assistance, fearing it would only worsen her situation. She decided to keep playing her role, believing it would save her life. She buried her face in the plate and had a small breakfast. Afterward, Paul and Barbara returned to the motel, where he abused her again. Initially, she fought back, which only fueled his anger. At one point, Barbara feared for her life, believing he might not stop in his rage. However, she managed to save herself once more by employing her understanding and psychological tactics. She stayed calm, engaged him in conversation, and successfully avoided a violent outcome for the second time. During their dialogue, Paul mentioned that he wanted to get to know Barbara before everything changed, clearly referring to his criminal actions. Thus, she realized that she had found a way to connect with him, and her chances of a positive outcome immediately increased. Later, Paul tied her to the bed again and stepped out to make a phone call. Barbara struggled to free herself, but was unsuccessful. Then she noticed a key on the nightstand. It appeared that Paul had hastily closed the door and locked it. Oddly, it seemed as if he had done this intentionally, perhaps to protect her from himself. A few minutes later, he began banging on the door from the outside. Barbara waited in silence, her heart racing. Through the door, he told her that he knew she couldn't speak because of the gag in her mouth. He urged her not to tell the police that Paul had hurt her, claiming he never meant to harm her and was sorry for what had happened. His final words were, "I love you, and I'm leaving." After that, the sounds outside faded away. He had truly left. At first, Barbara was too scared to move. She didn't scream or call for help, fearing he was still outside, waiting for a reason to hurt her. She wondered if he had said those things to test her, as if she needed to prove something. However, she also realized that if she waited too long, he might change his mind, and she would miss her chance to escape. Finally, Barbara managed to free herself using the sharp edge of a piece of glass from the nightstand. She quickly called the front desk, telling them that a serial killer had kidnapped her, then hung up. The administrator alerted the police and requested assistance. A few minutes later, police officers opened the door. After her release, Barbara immediately called Beverly to hear the voices of both her sister and her son. They were overjoyed that she had managed to escape. However, despite the happy reunion, Barbara was still troubled by the fact that Paul was still at large and could return to harm her. Her nightmare could not truly end as long as he remained free. Fortunately, she did not suffer serious physical injuries during her kidnapping, but the psychological effects left her deeply affected. Barbara experienced post-traumatic stress disorder for a long time. She credited her faith in God for helping her family heal and chose to forgive Paul in order to find peace moving forward. By November 17, law enforcement had learned that a patrol officer, Charles Campbell, was missing and suspected he might have been abducted by Paul. The officer had attempted to stop a vehicle and approached the driver's window, but he was too late and saw a weapon aimed at Charles. Paul kidnapped Charles and took the patrol car, leaving behind Barbara's car. Shortly after, the police vehicle was found abandoned on the roadside while Paul was trying to stop another driver, James Mayer. Now, Paul had two hostages, whom he later transferred to another vehicle after killing the driver. About 100 kilometers into Georgia, a gas station employee noticed a man in uniform acting strangely in the back seat of one of the vehicles that had pulled in. He promptly alerted emergency services. After the vehicle left, the employee reported his observations, which helped law enforcement identify the car and its location. They initiated a chase and managed to intercept the vehicle. However, Paul refused to stop, even with flat tires. Driving on flat tires didn't last long. He lost control and crashed into a barrier. Paul abandoned the vehicle and fled into the woods. The police chased him closely, and explosions were heard from the forest. Despite this, Paul managed to escape again. The following day, a hunter saw Paul in the woods. He noticed that Paul was injured and reported the sighting to the authorities. Eventually, Paul was captured and refused to reveal the location of Charles and James, the driver of a stolen car. On December 18, about a month after their abduction, they were found tied to a tree in Georgia, both dead from wounds inflicted by a weapon. News of Paul, the most dangerous serial killer, spread on television, bringing relief to Barbara and her family. She had spent over a day in captivity and fully realized the threat the detectives were facing. Barbara remembered that he had escaped from prison before and feared it could happen again, leaving her and her family feeling unsafe for a while. They moved in with relatives, but this offered little comfort to Barbara. Barbara understood that she could only find peace if Paul could never harm anyone again. During this time, she faced significant psychological struggles. On the way to prison, Paul had a devious plan in mind. He was placed in the sheriff's car, and they drove to the location. The driver and accompanying officer were unaware that Paul had a paperclip with him. During the drive, Paul waited for a moment when the officers were distracted and managed to pick the lock on his handcuffs. A struggle broke out, and he seized the officer's weapon. Fortunately, the sheriff reacted quickly. He attacked Paul, emptying his entire magazine, realizing that both were in mortal danger and only decisive action could save their lives. Paul had died. This news brought immense relief to Barbara, her family, and many others who had been anxiously following the villain's actions across the country. Finally, he could no longer pose a threat, allowing everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. After much contemplation, Barbara ultimately decided to stay in her home instead of moving. Although she was going through a difficult time, the house held memories of her mother and the joyful moments of her childhood. Among these memories was her miraculous escape from one of the most dangerous serial killers in the U.S. during the 1970s. As she worked to heal from her trauma, Barbara married Jim Abel. Despite the challenges she faced, including surviving cancer, she raised Dale. Motivated by her experiences and perhaps Paul's quest for notoriety, Barbara wrote a book detailing her abduction from her own perspective. She vividly described the horrors she faced with the killer and focused on the strategies she used to escape the fate that befell many of his victims. Sadly, her sister Beverly, who passed away from cancer in 2019, never had the chance to read Barbara's book, published in 2021, but Beverly was involved in the early stages of its creation and supported her sister throughout the process. As it turned out, besides Barbara, there was another survivor named Sandy Fox, who was also a writer. There is a theory that Paul intentionally left these two women alive so they could write books about him and make him famous. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Drew Shoden. Drew Katrina Shoden was born on September 26, 1981 in Minneapolis, Minnesota to Alan and Linda Shoden. She had an older brother, Sven. When Drew was 3, her parents divorced, but they remained on good terms. Her mother later married Sid Walker, a travel agent, and they raised Drew and her brother in a comfortable home on Whitefish Lake, a scenic vacation spot in Minnesota. Throughout high school, Drew excelled academically, earning honors and developed a passion for golf and art. Her true love was art, and her room was filled with her sketches of rock stars, models, and friends. After graduating from high school, Drew attended the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Those who knew her described her as a lively and caring person who loved to help others. She enjoyed traveling and exploring the country, with a dream of visiting Australia. In fact, she had plans to travel there in the spring of 2004. Before the event, Drew had 2 part-time jobs to save money. She worked as a sales associate at Victoria's Secret and as a waitress at a nightclub in Grand Forks. On Saturday, November 22, 2003, Drew finished her 4 p.m. shift at Victoria's Secret in Columbia Mall. She then went shopping and bought a purse from a store. After shopping, Drew walked to her car in the parking lot and called her boyfriend, Chris Lang. During the call, Drew suddenly said, "Okay, okay," and their connection was lost. Chris didn't think much of it since their conversation wasn't important, so he didn't call her back. About 3 hours later, Chris's phone rang again. When he answered, he only heard the sound of wind and phone buttons beeping. In a later television interview, Chris recalled his thoughts when the call with Drew was interrupted. At the time, he didn't sense any urgency and didn't imagine that something terrible was happening. He thought it was just a typical cell phone disconnection. It wasn't until later that he realized the call had been cut off for a much more sinister reason. Drew didn't show up for work at a nightclub, causing her colleagues to worry. Around the same time, her friend and roommate Meg Murphy got a call from the nightclub asking about Drew's whereabouts. Meg didn't know where Drew was and started searching for her by contacting their mutual friends and the local hospital, but she didn't find any leads. By 9 p.m., with no progress, Meg contacted the police, telling them that Drew worked at Columbia Mall. The police sent an officer to the mall, but it was already closed by the time they arrived. While searching the parking lot, the officer found Drew's car. When they inspected the vehicle, they discovered it was unlocked and showed no signs of a struggle or any evidence of a crime. However, they did find a black knife sheath on the ground near the car. The car's interior showed no evidence of theft, with personal belongings including papers, a wallet, and a newly purchased purse still on the seat, indicating that robbery was unlikely to be a motive for any trouble Drew might have encountered. With Drew's friends, boyfriend, and parents unaware of her whereabouts, investigators suspected a possible kidnapping. The investigation initially focused on Chris Lang as the prime suspect, but he was quickly ruled out after it was confirmed that he had a solid alibi, having been 300 miles away in Minnesota at the time of the incident. The police obtained information from Chris about 2 phone calls he had with Drew. The first call was suddenly cut off, and the second call, which took place a few hours later, picked up background noises, including wind sounds and button pressing. The investigators went to the mall where Drew worked the next day to review the security footage. Although there were no cameras in the parking lot where Drew's car was parked, there were multiple cameras inside the mall. Upon reviewing the footage, detectives found a clip of Drew entering a store after her shift. At 4:55 p.m., she calmly purchased a purse, wearing a pink sweater and holding a jacket. After paying, she put on her jacket and left the store, calling Chris on her way out. This call was made at exactly 5 p.m. As we know, their conversation was suddenly interrupted at 5:04 p.m. after Drew said, "Okay, okay." To recreate the events surrounding Drew's disappearance, a detective conducted an experiment. He set a timer for 4 minutes, the length of the interrupted call, and walked from the store where Drew bought her purse to the parking lot where her car was parked. When the timer went off, the detective had reached the parking lot near where Drew's car was found. This suggested that something must have happened to Drew while she was at her car. The investigation was hindered by the lack of surveillance cameras in the parking lot. Despite this challenge, Drew's disappearance generated widespread media attention, prompting a massive response from the public. Alongside the police, over 1,000 volunteers joined the search for Drew, and FBI officers were also involved in the investigation. Drew's last phone call was traced to Fisher, Minnesota, a 30-minute drive from her workplace. The surrounding area is rural, with vast fields. To search for clues, police used helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, horses, and dogs to scour the fields. They also asked local landowners to check their properties, but this initial search yielded no leads. As the investigation continued, the search area expanded daily. 4 days later, a boot was found under a bridge in Crookston, a small town about 30 miles from Grand Forks, where Drew vanished. Notably, a roommate remembered Drew wearing those boots on the day she disappeared. Forensic analysis later confirmed the boot belonged to Drew. In the Crookston area, further searches yielded no new leads, so the investigation turned its focus back to the Columbia Mall surveillance footage. This time, detectives scrutinized hundreds of hours of footage from various cameras, searching for signs of the abductor. They suspected that the person responsible might have been following Drew and could be visible in the footage. After hours of monitoring, the investigators identified a suspicious individual. The man was seen wandering aimlessly around the mall, not purchasing anything, and appeared more interested in observing the people around him than the products on sale. At 3:41 p.m., he sat down on a bench near the mall exit, continuing to watch people pass by. About 10 minutes later, he got up and walked away, wearing black gloves on his hands. After observing the man stand up and leave his seat, investigators made a crucial connection that he only did so when a blonde woman, pushing a grocery cart, walked by him and headed towards the parking lot. The detectives were convinced that this was not a mere coincidence, but rather the man had deliberately selected a potential target and was now following her. The police had no leads on the mysterious woman who was almost kidnapped at the mall, but Drew Shoden was the only person who vanished that day. Given their resemblance, it's possible the kidnapper had a specific type in mind, and so Drew was the next target. Drew left the mall around 5 p.m. when it was already dark, which could have made it easier for the perpetrator to strike. The investigation focused on 3 key locations: Grand Forks, where Drew was kidnapped; Fisher, where her phone was last active; and Crookston, where one of her shoes was found. The FBI reviewed the files of all registered sex offenders in these areas, comparing their photos to the image of the suspicious man from the mall. The only individual who fit the description was Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., a man with a criminal record marked by repeated offenses against women. Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., now 50, has spent 23 years in prison. He was born in Laredo, Texas, in 1953 to migrant worker parents. He was the second of 5 children. Rodriguez described his childhood as unhappy, citing his parents' excessive criticism and unreasonableness. For 15 years, his family moved from state to state before settling in Crookston in 1963. As he grew older, Rodriguez became increasingly isolated, partly due to language barriers. As a Spanish speaker, he struggled with English, making school challenging. He dropped out in the 9th grade and began working as a laborer at the American Crystal Sugar Company plant in Crookston. Rodriguez alleged that he was molested by older women during his youth, which he believed sparked his hostility towards women. In 1974, at 21, he asked a woman for a ride home, but instead took her to a driveway in Crookston, where he attacked her, grabbing her throat and trying to force her into submission. The following month, Rodriguez targeted another woman who was sitting in a parked truck outside a movie theater in Crookston. He threatened her with a knife and instructed her to follow him to a secluded rural area where he sexually assaulted her. In 1979, Rodriguez attempted to abduct a 69-year-old high school English teacher who was walking alone at night in Crookston. When he tried to force her into his car, she resisted. Enraged, Rodriguez stabbed her in the elbow and abdomen with a knife. Despite her injuries, she managed to escape and ran to safety. The teacher, who was also a skilled artist, created a composite sketch of Rodriguez that closely resembled him. This sketch ultimately led to his arrest. Rodriguez was found guilty of attempted kidnapping and aggravated assault, and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. He served his sentence until his release in May 2003. Notably, Rodriguez was released from prison just 6 months before Drew's disappearance, and he was registered as a high-risk sex offender, indicating that he was likely to reoffend. Alfonso Rodriguez's family expressed concerns to the Minnesota Department of Corrections that he might revert to his old ways before his prison release. But he was released since he had served his full sentence. After his release, Rodriguez moved in with his mother in Crookston, near the bridge where Drew's shoe was found, which wasn't in his favor. Detectives questioned Rodriguez, who denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance. He claimed to have visited the Columbia Mall on the day she vanished, saying he watched the movie Once Upon a Time in Mexico at the movie theater. However, investigators discovered that no Grand Forks movie theaters were showing that film on that day. After searching Rodriguez's car, the police came to a sad realization: Drew was probably no longer alive. According to Grand Forks County Sheriff Dan Hill, the search had shifted from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. In the interior of Rodriguez's car, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in several areas, which were later confirmed to be Drew's blood. The blood was found on the rear passenger window, back seat, and 2 other areas in the passenger compartment. The DNA from the blood matched Drew's DNA, which was obtained from her toothbrush. A folding knife was found in the trunk of Rodriguez's car, which matched the sheath found in the parking lot near Drew's vehicle. A receipt showed that Rodriguez had purchased the knife and sheath from a nearby hardware store. Although Drew's body was not found, the evidence was sufficient to charge Rodriguez with her disappearance 8 days later. Rodriguez was arrested and held in a Grand Forks jail. He denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance and refused to cooperate with investigators. Despite the evidence against him, he refused to provide any information about Drew's whereabouts. During a brief bond hearing, his bail was set at $5 million. The search for Drew persisted despite the suspect's silence, focusing on 3 towns. However, the search was hampered by heavy, unprecedented snowfall in the area. To aid in the search, the governors of North Dakota and Minnesota held a press conference on December 9th, pledging to deploy several hundred National Guard members and state employees. North Dakota Governor John Hoeven expressed that Drew's disappearance had affected every North Dakotan, while Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty commended the community and police for their cooperation. Despite their efforts, no results were found, and the search was eventually suspended due to deteriorating weather conditions. When spring arrived, the search resumed with renewed intensity. As the winter snow began to melt, searchers hoped to finally find Drew after 5 long months. Unfortunately, it wasn't until April 17, 2004, that her body was discovered in a field in Crookston, just a few miles from where the boot was initially found. Drew's family was devastated when they received the heartbreaking news. Her father described the moment, saying that they had been waiting for that call, and when it came, it felt like time had stopped. This was their worst fear come true, and it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The body was found in a field that had already been searched, but the large snowdrifts had concealed it. The circumstances of the crime were immediately apparent. Drew was naked from the waist down, her hands were tied behind her back, and a rope was around her neck. There were also signs of a plastic bag having been placed over her head before the rope was tied. DNA evidence linked to Rodriguez was found on Drew's jacket. An autopsy revealed that she had been subjected to a brutal beating and stabbing before her death. The medical examiner identified 3 possible causes of death: the neck wound, suffocation, or hypothermia. Drew Chaudin's family was finally able to say goodbye to her on April 24, 2004, after months of uncertainty. A mourning ceremony in North Dakota was attended by around 1,500 people. The crime involved both North Dakota and Minnesota, which made it a federal crime since Drew was taken across state lines. This meant the prosecutor's office could pursue the death penalty for Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez was found guilty of Drew's murder on August 30, 2006, and the jury recommended the death sentence. Judge Ralph Erickson sentenced him to death on February 8, 2007, citing the senseless and violent nature of his crime. Notably, Rodriguez became the first person to be sentenced to death in North Dakota in almost a century. However, even after 6 years on death row, Rodriguez refused to admit his guilt. It wasn't until June 28, 2013, that he finally confessed to kidnapping and killing Drew. But the story is not over yet. Ralph Erickson, a former district judge, became a U.S. Court of Appeals judge and later reversed his own decision that had sentenced Rodriguez to death. In 2021, he ordered a new sentencing phase, emphasized that Rodriguez's guilt was clear in question, confirmed by multiple DNA tests. The issue at hand is the appropriateness of the death penalty in this case. Erickson overturned the death sentence, citing two key reasons. Firstly, the defense attorneys failed to thoroughly investigate Rodriguez's mental health. Secondly, forensic expert Michael McGee's testimony was misleading. McGee claimed that Rodriguez had violated Drew's sexual integrity within 24 to 36 hours of her abduction, but there was no concrete evidence to support this, such as Rodriguez's seminal fluid on Drew's body. According to Erickson, McGee's opinion was not based on facts and misled him, influencing his original verdict. Despite reversing the death sentence, Erickson noted that the circumstances of Drew's body being found naked below the waist with her hands tied behind her back suggested a sexually motivated crime, even without Rodriguez's seminal fluid being present. Judge Erickson ruled that Alfonso Rodriguez's constitutional rights were violated because his mental health was not properly examined, both in general and at the time of his crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. As a child, she was cheerful and close to her parents. However, as she grew older, Carly struggled with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Despite these challenges, she made efforts to overcome them. In 2014, at the age of 31, Carly lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia, with her two children, 7-year-old William and 3-year-old Cadence. On September 30, 2014, Carly's boyfriend, Sale, took her to Muswell Brook, where her daughter Cadence lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly spent a few hours with Cadence at Andrew's house, arriving around 12:30 p.m. Sale dropped her off but did not stay, agreeing to return later that day. However, when Sale came back to pick Carly up, she was no longer at Andrew's house. According to Andrew, Carly and he got into an argument, and she left, planning to walk to the nearby McDonald's restaurant, about 20 minutes away. Sale was surprised when Carly didn't call to let him know where to meet her, so he tried calling her instead. However, he couldn't reach her. Assuming she had said she was going to McDonald's, Sale drove there to look for her. Along the way, he kept an eye out for her, thinking she might be waiting somewhere. He considered the possibility that her phone was dead, but he couldn't find her anywhere. She wasn't at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale spent some time driving around Muswell Brook, but it was all in vain. Carly had seemingly vanished. When Carly failed to return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that their routine was always the same. He would drop her off, she would get out of the car, wave goodbye, and then call and text him twice to let him know she was safe. But on this particular day, things didn't go as usual. Sale dropped her off at 12:30 p.m., but never heard from her again. Despite trying to call and text her, the phone just rang out. A key question emerged. Did Carly leave her ex-partner Andrew Easton's house, or was he hiding something? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but no one else could confirm she actually left his house. The police questioned neighbors and people along the route Carly would have taken to get to McDonald's, but nobody reported seeing her. This lack of eyewitnesses only fueled suspicion about Andrew. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house to verify his claim that Carly left around 2 p.m. The police searched fields behind a nearby residential area, but the chief investigator reported that nothing significant was found. The investigation will continue, and the police are urging anyone with information about Carly's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and carrying a tan handbag. Police investigators obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched the house where Carly was last seen, looking for clues that could help explain her disappearance. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of criminal activity or new leads. However, they did stumble upon a suspicious discovery. Carly's Facebook account had been deleted just a few hours after she went missing, and before anyone had even reported her disappearance to the authorities. This mysterious deletion sparked a lot of questions and prompted further investigation. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents, Steve and Lorraine Williams, sought assistance in finding their daughter. With the help of Detective Timothy Seymour, they made a public appeal, requesting any information that could aid in the case. During the appeal, Lorraine became emotional and pleaded for help, saying that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help them. The family has struggled since Carly's disappearance, with Steve and Lorraine explaining that their situation is complicated, particularly when it comes to Carly's children. The children have 2 different fathers, and the family has had limited contact with them. Steve and Lorraine hope that this will change, allowing them to reconnect with their grandchildren. Lorraine expressed the deep sorrow of Carly's children, who would never again experience their mother's loving kisses, warm hugs, and laughter. They were unable to say goodbye, and their memories were frozen in time. She described the family's pain and frustration, feeling trapped in limbo, and emphasized their need to find Carly and give her dignity and respect in death. Carly's children, William and Cadence, needed to know what happened to their mother to heal and move forward, free from the burden of pain and uncertainty. Lorraine begged for the truth, expressing that while her daughter was gone, her children needed closure and justice. She implored the responsible person to come forward, break their silence, and let the family find peace. The police shifted their focus to Sale Newson, another possible suspect, as they were unable to connect Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner, Andrew Easton. Investigations revealed that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled. Sale was extremely jealous, which often sparked their arguments, despite their relatively short time together. Although Sale publicly claimed to be deeply in love with Carly, saying she was the first woman he had loved in 14 years, his actions told a different story. He started intimate relationships with other women almost immediately, even offering sex to several women just hours after reporting Carly missing. On October 2nd, just 2 days after Carly's disappearance, Sale spent the night with another woman, yet in public, he pretended to be grief-stricken over losing the love of his life. Detectives also learned that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before she vanished, triggered by Facebook messages from other men. However, while this evidence was suspicious, it was still circumstantial, and the police needed more concrete evidence to bring charges against Sale Newson. In 2015, authorities searched 3 properties in Muswellbrook and Scone, Wales, seizing 3 firearms, illegal substances, and arresting 24-year-old James Kineen, unrelated to Carly's disappearance, but a notable name in the investigation. 2 years after, on September 30, 2014, the police investigation had stalled with no new leads. But on August 7, 2016, a major breakthrough came when 2 pedestrians stumbled upon human remains in a shallow grave in a bush off the road near Scone. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Carly McBride. The police waited 4 days before announcing the discovery, hoping to gather more evidence. Carly's parents, who are still grieving, are asking the public to come forward with any information they might have. They are thankful for the help that led to finding their daughter's body, but they still want to know who was responsible for her disappearance and are seeking closure. Over 10 months, investigators probed a case leading to Sale Newson's arrest warrant on June 19, 2017. After his arrest, Newson denied involvement in Carly McBride's death. Authorities also charged James Canine, 26, for helping Newson dispose of the body. The three knew each other from a rehab center for addicts, staying in touch despite leaving at different times. The trial of Sale Newson began in 2018 and lasted for years due to limited evidence. Prosecutors claimed Newson attacked Carly in a jealous rage, causing her death. Forensic experts found she died from multiple blunt force trauma, including 23 skull fractures and 13 torso and spinal fractures. The judge ruled Newson's actions caused Carly's death, noting he had claimed to be a skilled mixed martial arts fighter with 20 undefeated fights. The judge concluded Carly died from severe brain trauma caused by a high degree of force to the head, likely inflicted by Newson's fists, feet, or objects. During a search of Newson's house, police found a map in a shoebox under the bed with a circle around Muswell Brook and Scone, where Carly's remains were later found. The map also had numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it, which a senior constable linked to point-to-point cameras. Newson mentioned to Carly's father that the skeleton was missing hand bones, a detail only known to the police, Carly's parents, and the forensic medicine department. This suggested Newson was familiar with the crime scene and had left Carly's body there. The clothes on the remains matched what she wore on the day she disappeared, indicating she died soon after leaving her partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newson's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newson took on the way to Muswell Brook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newson offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newson injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets, searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. While volunteers and police searched for her around Muswell Brook and handed out missing person flyers, Newson was in Sydney messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. The more investigators dug into Newson, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutors said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge found that Newson's motive for suddenly and violently attacking Carly was jealousy. Newson had gone to pick Carly up from Muswell Brook, expecting her to have spent time with her daughter as planned. Instead, he discovered she had met her ex-partner for 90 minutes. This revelation allegedly triggered a fit of jealousy in Newson, leading him to brutally attack Carly. Carly's mother, Lorraine Williams, recounted the immense grief and anxiety she experienced during a 2-year wait for justice. A wait that ended with the devastating realization that her happy and outgoing daughter would never come home to her 2 young children. When she finally saw Carly again, it was in the morgue, an experience she described as the worst day of her life. In December 2021, 43-year-old Newson was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2038, nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing. Despite the guilty verdict, Newson maintained his innocence, stating to the judge. Newson's accomplice, James Canine, also denied his involvement but was found guilty by a jury in July 2022. The judge determined that Canine had lied to police 3 times to create a false alibi for Newson and deleted phone data to conceal his actions. At the time of his involvement in the Carly McBride case, Canine was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances. In November 2022, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period, showing little reaction to the news. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed relief that justice had been served, but they also acknowledged that no matter the outcome, they would never be able to get their daughter back. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Tess Ritchie. Tess Ritchie was the youngest of 5 sisters, born on November 30th, 1994. She spent her childhood in North Bay before moving to Toronto at the age of 19. According to her sister Verena, Tess loved her life, dogs, and family. She worked as a waitress in Toronto, but her dream job was to become a flight attendant and travel the world. Although Tess struggled to find a job she liked, her family was always willing to support her financially. Some sources suggest that after failing to find work at an airline or hotel, she began learning Italian and searching for job opportunities in Italy online. Tess also created content on YouTube, with her last video uploaded on February 23, 2014, nearly 4 years before the events we will discuss. In that video, Tess shared her personal experiences and the challenges she faced. Tess explained that she searched everywhere for someone who would understand and relate to what she was experiencing, but she never found that. She said her boyfriend's physical abuse is never acceptable, no matter how minor it may seem. She stated that he hit her, and even downplaying it as just throwing a purse at her is embarrassing because it happened in his bedroom, and it's a sad reality. After recording this video, Tess mentioned that she faced more personal struggles. In 2017, she experienced a devastating breakup with her boyfriend Julian on November 23rd. The next day, she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was not only 8 years older, but also her closest confidant. Tess recounted that she spent most of November 24th at Rachel's house in Toronto, where they discussed her breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. Rachel had to encourage her to eat dinner because she had lost her appetite due to stress. Despite her emotional state, Tess made plans to meet an old school friend, Riley Samar, that night. Samar was from North Bay, and she had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. They hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tango, a well-known drag bar in the Church in Wellesley area, that evening. Rachel's partner arranged for Ritchie to take an Uber to meet Samar downtown. Ritchie saw her sister Tess running out to catch the Uber, which was the last time she would ever see her alive. Ritchie arrived at the Cruise and Tango club around midnight, but Samar wasn't there yet. The club was packed, and Tess sent a text to her sister to let her know she had arrived safely. The next morning, Ritchie sent a text to her sister, not expecting a quick response since Tess had been out late the night before. However, by 6:30 p.m., Ritchie still hadn't heard back from Tess. She then discovered that none of her texts had been delivered to Tess's phone. When Ritchie tried calling, the calls went straight to voicemail. Their mother, Christine Hermiston also attempted to contact Tess, but her phone was turned off. Christine got a notification that her daughter Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m., but then the ride was canceled. This happened because Tess had used Christine's credit card to set up her Uber account, so Christine received updates on all of Tess's Uber rides. When Christine and her family couldn't reach Tess during the day and her phone stayed off, they started to worry because Tess always kept in touch with them. Rachel typically kept her phone with her at all times. On Saturday night around 9 p.m., she asked her partner to check on her sister's apartment in Scarborough while she reached out to her friends. Tess was still missing, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Rachel began calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the following evening, the police had no updates for Tess's family. Multiple officers were assigned to search for Tess Ritchie, but no one had seen or heard from her in the past 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to help with the search. They distributed flyers featuring Tess's picture, hoping someone might recognize her. The family did everything they could, but unfortunately, the police's investigation into Tess's disappearance was lacking. Meanwhile, Tess's friend Riley, who had gone to the bar with her that night, returned home safely. When asked about Tess's whereabouts, Riley mentioned that they had both been drinking heavily, which led to the bar's security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 a.m. and headed to Wellesley Street to grab a bite to eat. On their way, they met a guy who decided to join them, but Riley couldn't remember his name. Once on Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess asked for a vegetarian hot dog, which led to a disagreement with the vendor. Tess thought she received a meat hot dog, and Riley noted that Tess accidentally sprayed mustard all over the vendor's cart. After that, Tess, Riley, and their new companion ran to Dundonald Street. There, they encountered a woman named Michelle on her porch and struck up a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. Tess confided in Michelle about her recent breakup and how difficult it had been for her. Michelle offered her support, and they even exchanged phone numbers. Michelle observed that Richie seemed to be trying to enjoy himself, but when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a deep sadness. The breakup with Julian seemed to be affecting Riley heavily. Riley reassured her that things would improve and encouraged her to stay strong. At 4 a.m., Riley got a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and headed towards Yonge Street before going home. Tess felt let down that Riley had left so early. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber, suggesting that she decided to go home too after Riley left. The Uber driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess was not there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just a day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine began handing out flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where Tess was last seen. Since Riley had separated from Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to investigate that area. She reached out to Anne Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, knowing their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they began searching for Ritchie as efforts intensified and social media campaigns aimed to find her. During this time, Brazo made a chilling discovery while looking into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell at a construction site located at 582 Church Street. She immediately recognized Ritchie's body lying on the concrete. "I was in complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't understand what I was seeing," said Anne, fighting back tears. Feeling frightened, she noticed dust from a nearby gravel pile settled on Ritchie's body. Brazo let go of the staircase railing and stepped back down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Meanwhile, Hermiston was further up the sidewalk, unaware that her daughter's body was so near. Brazo called out to her, "Christine, come back here. There's a girl in the stairwell. You need to come back." Hermiston turned and ran down the driveway, stopping suddenly at the stairwell. After a few moments, she began to scream, pleading with God for assistance. Tess's death presented a heartbreaking event for her entire family. They discovered her body only 300 yards from the bar where she had been before disappearing, and just 20 yards from the last place her friend Riley saw her. This situation raised many questions about the police's response, especially since her body had been found just a couple of blocks from the bar. After Anne and Christine located Tessa's body, an anonymous police source shared new information with the media. It was reported that Tessa had advertised her intimate services online and had worked at a strip club. Tessa's mother stated that the Toronto police did not adequately search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. This assumption was horrifying to Hermiston, who expressed her anger at the media's portrayal. After Richie's body was found, police sources claimed she was involved in the sex trade, which Hermiston called a blatant lie. They spread this information to suggest she led a high-risk lifestyle, deflecting blame from themselves. Although Tess briefly worked as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after starting. The mention of intimate services was linked to a dating site account, not a profession. Despite the discovery of Richie's body, the circumstances of her death remained unclear. Initially, police did not suspect foul play, but the homicide unit took over when an autopsy indicated she had died from neck compression. Additionally, they discovered seminal fluid on her clothing and saliva on her bra. DNA tests revealed male DNA, prompting police to begin searching for a suspect. Based on Riley's testimony, detectives aimed to identify the man Tess had met that night, as he was the person she spent time with after Riley went home. The police examined CCTV footage to gather information about that night. The video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and heading towards a hot dog vendor. There were also cameras on the building near where Anne discovered the body. After reviewing the recordings, the police observed Tess and an unidentified man walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. A subsequent recording taken 46 minutes later showed the man leaving the location alone, with no further footage of Tess. This led the police to consider him the main suspect in the Tess Richie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police released images of him obtained from the surveillance footage. They hoped that someone would be able to identify him. The police discovered the identity of the man after seeing the published images. He called the police station himself and stated that he was the guy in the photo. The person who was with Tess that night was identified as 21-year-old Colin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 years old and living with his parents and younger brother in their home in North Toronto. He had completed a year of postgraduate studies to become a car mechanic and was working with his father in construction. Schlatter, along with his parents and one of his lawyers, visited the police station where he spoke briefly with detectives but chose not to testify. But finally, they provided the police with important evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter discarded an empty water bottle in a trash can. The police took the bottle and sent it for forensic analysis. After some time, they found that the DNA on the bottle matched DNA samples taken from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Richie's body, indicating that they came from the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to observe Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results sped up their timeline. Schlatter was arrested at approximately 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at a cinema. He was taken to the 13th Division and placed in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. 2 other men were in holding cells next to him, both of whom were undercover police officers. Schlatter was unaware that he was about to provide them with a significant amount of evidence. The 3 men were in plain holding cells, each containing a combination toilet, sink, and bed. In the cell, Schlatter discussed his love for card games and claimed he had a knack for attracting women. He bragged about having slept with over 40 women, even though he was only 21. Schlatter did not encounter Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He saw them for the first time in the same bar where he was present. This recording was made just before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Schlatter also spoke to undercover officers about Tess. Initially, he claimed she was alive when he departed. However, he later suggested that something might have happened because alcohol had clouded his memory. He doubted his own capability. The police charged Ken Schlatter with the murder of Tess Ritchie, but he denied the accusation. In June 2018, police officers Alan McCullough and Michael Jones were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The report of hearing stated that they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the nearby property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and inform a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. During the 2020 trial of Ken Schlatter, his defense argued that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building, thus avoiding the cameras. The lawyers even named another suspect, but the police thoroughly investigated and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Ken Schlatter. Schlatter, a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court, explained that he has a speech defect, causing him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. He claimed that Tess offered him a place to hide from prying eyes at 4:02 a.m., which explained the presence of his DNA on her belongings. Tess Ritchie had ordered an Uber, but when the driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., she wasn't there. Instead, Calvin Schlatter approached her again. They sat down on a bench at the corner of street. Schlatter stated that Tess seemed upset after their argument, so he went over to check on her. Schlatter claimed Tess asked him to sit and talk, but with no audio on security videos, it can't be confirmed. He said she was upset about her breakup, so he shared a similar experience to comfort her. Schlatter claimed that later, Tess asked if it was okay to kiss him. He said they stood up, hugged, and kissed each other. However, there is no footage of this kiss on the available CCTV footage. Schlatter claims that Tess Ritchie asked him to accompany her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and then down the outdoor stairwell. However, the prosecution questioned his motives, as an Uber driver was waiting for Tess at the time. It is unclear what Schlatter said to Tess to persuade her to walk with him into the darkness at 4 a.m. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, and he ejaculated in his pants. He wanted to take things further, but Tess refused. Schlatter states that after this, he invited Tess to his house, but she declined and told him to leave. He claims that he left, and Tess was alive when he departed. There were only 2 people who knew the truth about the events of that night. Unfortunately, one of them had already passed away. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 key witnesses, Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tepp, a woman who had spoken with Tess and Schlatter that night. Both Riley and Michelle identified Schlatter. In addition to talking to 2 undercover police officers, Schlatter is also alleged to have shared important details with a cellmate, known only as ES due to a publication ban, when they were both being held at a Toronto detention center for about 2 months in 2018. ES has a long history of criminal activity, including multiple break-ins and a domestic assault. The informant, who shared a cell with Calvin Schlatter, initially felt sympathetic towards Schlatter because he was a young man experiencing imprisonment for the first time. However, as time passed, his opinion of Schlatter changed. Schlatter would often cry himself to sleep, claiming he didn't want to serve his sentence and missing his mother. Despite this, Schlatter showed no regret when discussing the death of Tess Ritchie. According to him, Schlatter admitted to kissing Ritchie and losing control when she refused to go further, ultimately strangling her with a scarf. In court, Schlatter denied having these conversations with the informant, and his lawyer portrayed the informant as a deceitful liar. Nevertheless, physical evidence suggests that Richie was strangled, and only Schlatter's DNA was found on her clothing. In her final statement to the jury, defense attorney Lydia Riva presented her client, Schlatter, as a harmless and innocent young man. She acknowledged that it can be difficult to accept, but the criminal justice system is not infallible and can sometimes make mistakes. On March 23, 2020, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Schlatter to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The trial was emotionally devastating for Richie's family and supporters, who were often left reeling and in tears in the courtroom. Tess's death has left the family feeling guilty and broken, struggling to look at each other. They're seeking $20 million in damages, including punitive damages, to ensure justice for their daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeature, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005, when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, They revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. She revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then-County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McPhee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007, after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Patt's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, the revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McPhee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Patt's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning, and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jamison Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, USA. She spent her childhood in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Despite her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced a challenging situation when she became pregnant at the age of 16. However, she was determined to be a good mother and had no doubts about having her child. After the breakup with Carl, the father of her child, Danielle gave birth to her son, Tristan, in 1996. At just 17 years old, she became a single mother. Despite the challenges, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. She eventually met Luis, a man who would become a father figure to Tristan. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers and had been friends in the past. When they started dating, Danielle was happy to have found someone who could support her and her son. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and she felt like her life was finally falling into place. They moved in together, and Danielle found a job at a landscaping company. She was proud of herself for taking this step and was glad to have found a sense of stability and security. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. At the time, Danielle's life was on the upswing. She had a wonderful son, was engaged to the man she loved, and had promising career prospects. However, her life was about to take a devastating turn. On March 15, 1999, Louise came home from work to find Danielle lifeless on their bed. Their son, Tristan, was at daycare that day. Louise immediately knew something was wrong based on the color of Danielle's skin. He called 911 and police arrived at their apartment in Norcross, Georgia. The initial information was that a woman had died and her fiancé had made the 911 call. This raised suspicions among investigators, as it is not uncommon for the partner to be involved in the death of their loved one. Louise reported the crime to the police at the apartment entrance, stating that the victim was 20-year-old Danielle Jennings. According to Louise, he found Danielle's body when he returned from work. She was lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered that she was dead. Louise immediately called 911. The police took Louise to the station for questioning, and investigators examined the crime scene. Danielle was lying on her back on the bed, fully dressed, with a ligature around her neck. The ligature was a stocking tied very tightly, indicating that the perpetrator left her no chance of survival. The stocking was tied at the back of Danielle's neck, suggesting that the perpetrator was behind her when she was strangled. The bed was disheveled and one of the dresser drawers was open, possibly indicating that the perpetrator took the stocking from her drawer. Additionally, Danielle's purse had been rummaged through, with its contents dumped out. The police considered the possibility that the crime was a robbery that escalated into murder, but noted that valuable items such as cameras and jewelry remained untouched. The investigators considered the possibility that the perpetrator's goal was to steal from the apartment, but after encountering Danielle, decided to kill her to eliminate her as a witness. They also explored the possibility that the crime scene was staged, as the front door showed no signs of forced entry. After searching the surrounding area, they found no evidence. The sliding glass door leading to the backyard was locked and showed no signs of forced entry. Based on their findings, the investigators concluded that Danielle must have let the perpetrator involuntarily, or that the perpetrator had a key to the apartment. This led them to focus on Louise, Danielle's fiancé, as the main suspect during their questioning. Louise was very emotional about the situation, as romantic relationships can sometimes lead to intense anger and sad consequences. The interrogation began with questions about his whereabouts on the day of his fiancé's death. According to Louise, he spent the entire day at work, and the last time he saw Danielle was Danielle was when he left for work in the morning. They both left the apartment at 6:45 a.m., but Danielle returned to get something. Louise claimed that Danielle was worried about an important meeting with management that day and seemed a little distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to ask if he wanted to go to lunch with her, but he refused because he had a lot of work to do. Louise tried to contact Danielle later that day, but she wasn't answering. He called her colleagues and learned that she had gone out for lunch but never returned. When he tried to call their home phone, Danielle didn't answer. This led him to leave work and check on her. When he arrived at their apartment, he noticed that the front door was unlocked, and he found a jar that made him nervous. During the investigation, Louise stated that they had a good relationship and were deeply in love. Louise expressed that he was depressed and felt that the police were wasting their time by interrogating him, as he believed the real culprit was still at large. Detectives interviewed Danielle's friends and family, who all confirmed that Louise could not harm Danielle, as they were planning a wedding and were in love. Louis's co-workers also confirmed that he was at work all day, which ruled out any possibility of his involvement in the crime. Louise mentioned that Danielle had been receiving excessive attention from her co-worker, Jeff, who made her uncomfortable. Investigators went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss, who confirmed that Danielle had complained about Jeff's behavior. Jeff's behavior was making Danielle uncomfortable. He was touching her and interfering with her work. Danielle had made it clear that she was in a committed relationship with Louise. Despite this, Jeff continued to make Danielle feel uncomfortable. The situation was also complicated by the fact that Jeff was 40 years old, while Danielle was just 20. Danielle's co-workers reported that she left the office for lunch, but never returned, providing investigators with a timeline for when the attack occurred. This raised suspicions about Jeff, who was absent from the office during the same time frame. The investigation explored the possibility that Jeff may have attacked Danielle after she opened the front door to her home. This could explain why there were no signs of forced entry. Jeff was brought in for questioning to discuss his relationship with Danielle. During the questioning, Jeff acknowledged inviting Danielle to lunch, but denied any involvement in Danielle's death. He did admit to liking Danielle, but stated that he didn't engage in any inappropriate behavior that would justify her complaint against him. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to Jeff, he was with another colleague all day, working on various issues and driving around the city together. This meant that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Jeff identified a co-worker who he claimed was with him at the time of the crime. Investigators met with this co-worker, who confirmed Jeff's alibi, thus ruling out Jeff from suspect. The autopsy report provided some insight into the circumstances of Danielle's death. The cause of death was asphyxia, indicating that Danielle was attacked by surprise. Investigators concluded that the perpetrator approached her from behind and tightened the stocking until she lost consciousness. The perpetrator then tied the stocking in a knot to prevent Danielle from regaining consciousness. The lack of defensive injuries on her body suggested that Danielle did not resist the attack. In fact, the only injury on her body was the ligature mark on her neck, indicating that she may not have even seen the face of her attacker. The police investigation at the crime scene did not yield any evidence that could help identify the perpetrator. Despite a thorough search, no shoe prints, DNA, fingerprints, or hair were found. As a result, there was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Without any new leads, the police returned to their initial theory that the crime was a robbery gone wrong. The police asked Luis to re-examine the apartment with them to see if he could notice anything unusual. After a thorough examination, Luis reported that nothing seemed to be missing from the apartment and all items were in their usual places. However, a few days later, Luis contacted the police to report that he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. Luis also pointed out another unusual detail to the investigators. The stocking used to strangle Danielle did not belong to her. According to Luis, Danielle did not wear stockings, which suggested that the perpetrator had brought the stocking with them. One of her friends mentioned her ex-boyfriend Eddie, whom she started dating while pregnant. Eddie was known for his violent behavior, and as the relationship progressed, he became increasingly controlling and domineering. He eventually forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie continued to deteriorate after Danielle gave birth to her son. Things took a turn for the worse when Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided to end the relationship. Danielle attempted to start anew after leaving Eddie, but he refused to accept the end of their relationship. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable, prompting Danielle to obtain a restraining order against him. However, Eddie repeatedly disregarded the order. Eddie's actions escalated, with him frequently calling Danielle, parking near her home, and even appearing at her workplace. Danielle's family reported that Eddie had made numerous calls to her in the months leading up to her death, demanding that she meet with him, but she consistently hung up on him. Detectives identified Eddie as a prime suspect and brought him in for questioning. He was hostile and resistant to cooperating with the police. When discussing Danielle, his demeanor became visibly agitated. During the interrogation, Eddie's account of his relationship with Danielle contradicted the statements made by her family members. He claimed to have never been violent towards her and denied any involvement in her death, stating that he had not spoken to her in over a year. The investigators suspected that Eddie was lying to them. To verify his alibi, they checked Danielle's phone call history and discovered that Eddie had been in contact with her in the months leading up to her death. The police needed to confirm Eddie's whereabouts at the time of the attack. Eddie claimed to have been working out of state as a tow truck driver at the time of Danielle's death. He stated that he was miles away from the Ashley Lakes apartments where Danielle lived. His employer corroborated Eddie's story, providing receipts from a motel and gas stations that suggested Eddie was indeed out of state. However, 3 days after Danielle's death, the police received a new lead that changed the direction of the investigation. During an interview with residents of Ashley Lakes apartments, a woman shared a disturbing incident that had occurred a week before Danielle's death. She reported that she had been awoken by a knock on her door, but when she looked through the peephole, no one was there. She returned to bed, but a minute later, she heard her front door slam shut. She reported an incident where a maintenance man entered her apartment without permission. She stated that he was looking at her rather than performing his job, which made her feel uncomfortable. This incident led to an investigation, and the woman provided a description of the man to the police. Further investigation revealed that another woman had reported a similar incident, where a man entered her apartment claiming to need to change light bulbs, despite her apartment not needing any new bulbs. The man made a statement suggesting that he might be in the wrong apartment and then left. The management of Ashley Lakes apartments provided investigators with a list of maintenance specialists working at the complex, and only one matched the description given by the two women. This individual was identified as Calvin Oliver, a 42-year-old maintenance worker who started working at the complex in September 1998. When shown his photo, both women identified Oliver as the man who entered their apartments without permission. The investigation also revealed that Oliver had been working at the complex when a string of incidents involving stolen items occurred, including missing cash, checks, jewelry, and computers. As the investigation continued, detectives searched for potential connections between Calvin Oliver and Danielle Jennings. They discovered that Oliver had performed work in Jennings' apartment just a couple of weeks before her death. This revelation made Oliver a key person of interest in the investigation. Oliver likely knew that Danielle and her fiancé Luis would be at work during the day, allowing him to enter their apartment without raising suspicion using his master key. It's possible that Danielle returned home for lunch while Oliver was already inside. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by investigators. Initially, they asked him about the thefts that some Ashley Lakes apartments residents had reported. He denied any involvement. When questioned about Danielle Jennings, Oliver claimed he had heard about what happened to her but didn't know her personally. He admitted to doing work in her apartment, but the police lacked concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Just before releasing Oliver from the police station, investigators decided to run a database check on him. The results were shocking. Oliver had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear on a burglary charge related to the theft of personal checks. Oliver had a significant criminal history, with convictions dating back to 1974, including residential burglaries, armed robbery, and sexual assault. He spent most of his life in prison, which raises the question of how he was able to get a job at Ashley Lakes apartments. This is relevant because if Oliver was in Danielle's apartment when she came in, he had a motive to hurt her to avoid going back to prison. The police detained Oliver due to an active warrant for his arrest, which gave them time to investigate his involvement in Danielle's death. As part of their investigation into the thefts at Ashley Lakes apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. There, they found stolen belongings from other residents, as well as Danielle's wedding ring, which linked Oliver to her death. 9 days after Danielle's death, Calvin Oliver was charged with first-degree felony and burglary. After his false statement was exposed, Oliver refused to answer any more questions and chose to remain silent. During the trial, the prosecution presented a different scenario. Oliver killed Danielle after she caught him stealing at her apartment on March 14th, as she unexpectedly returned home from work. The trial lasted 5 days, and the jury delivered a guilty verdict on October 13, 2000. The court sentenced Oliver to life in prison for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for stealing her wedding ring. As a result, Danielle's mother and stepfather, Sherry and Philip Jennings, gained custody of her son, Tristan. Ashley Lake's Apartments was aware of Oliver's troubled past, but failed to conduct a background check on him. This lack of oversight allowed Oliver, who had spent most of his life in prison, to reside in the same apartment complex as Danielle. Danielle's family sued Ashley Lake's Apartments after a series of thefts, and the murder went unreported by management. They claimed negligent hiring, inadequate security, and death. The jury returned a verdict of over $13 million, plus $2.5 million in punitive damages initially, later reduced to $250,000. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989 in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ekaterina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ekaterina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ekaterina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ekaterina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ekaterina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ekaterina. In 2017, Ekaterina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ekaterina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ekaterina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ekaterina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ekaterina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ekaterina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ekaterina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ekaterina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ekaterina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ekaterina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ekaterina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ekaterina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ekaterina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologist deemed severe. Although Katerina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Katerina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Katerina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Katerina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Katerina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Katerina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Katerina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Katerina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Katerina for 2 days. Katerina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Katerina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Katerina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, the fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Katerina Baumann. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Katerina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Katerina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, the police found a pink scarf matching the one Katerina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Katerina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Bauman, Walter's mother. The white jacket Katerina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Katerina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Katerina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Katerina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Katerina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Katerina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Katerina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Bauman made a shocking statement, claiming she took Katerina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Katerina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Katerina hit her, Ludmila choked Katerina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Katerina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Katerina and their daughter. but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter, who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Baumann. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Sam Herr was born to parents Stephen and Raquel Kalberman on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California. As their only child, Sam Herr was showered with love and attention from his parents, his father being a special education teacher and his mother a stay-at-home parent. Sam Herr maintained a close relationship with his parents even after he moved away. Despite his physically imposing stature, Sam Herr's friends affectionately referred to him as a gentle giant, describing him as a fun-loving and laid-back individual. Sam Herr enlisted in the United States Army at a young age and completed tours of duty in Afghanistan and Germany as part of the 173rd Airborne. After serving for 3 years, he was honorably discharged and returned to Southern California to pursue higher education using the GI Bill. His goal was to complete college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. To achieve this, Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College, where he befriended Julie Kibushi, who was 3 years his junior. However, Sam Herr struggled with the emotional aftermath of his military service, ultimately developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a common affliction among veterans. When 28-year-old Sam Herr failed to visit his parents' house over a weekend as planned, they began to worry. Sam Herr's parents, Stephen and Raquel, became increasingly concerned after several attempts to contact their son went unanswered. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, Stephen went to Sam Herr's apartment in Costa Mesa with his wife to see what was amiss. Their discovery led to immediate panic when they could not find their son and only saw Julie Kibushi in a state of horror. Stephen quickly dialed 911 as Raquel choked and screamed. The moment they realized Julie had met a gruesome end, they knew their lives would never be the same, and the trauma would have a lasting impact. The Costa Mesa community was shocked by the incident, as murders are rare there. At the apartment, police found no signs of a disturbance. The bedroom, however, presented a disturbing scene. On the bedside table, investigators found an unused knife, as well as 2 books, a combat manual and a sex guide. But it was the condition of the bed that was truly horrifying. The bed was soaked in the Julie Kibushi's blood, and the deceased Julie Kibushi was found in a compromising position, partially lying on the bed and partially kneeling on the floor. Her pants had been pulled down, exposing her lower body, leading detectives to suspect that she may have been sexually assaulted before her murder. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, with 1 bullet entering the top center of her skull. Although a knife was found on the bedside table, it appeared to have been unused. Other unusual details included a tiara on the victim's head and the words, "All yours," scrawled on the back of Julie Kibushi's sweater. Julie Kibushi's handbag was found in the kitchen. The detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi, who was born on Valentine's Day in 1987 to a Japanese-American family. She was the first daughter and third of 4 children to parents June and Masa Kibushi. Her parents affectionately called her "my Valentine girl" from a young age. Julie Kibushi developed a passion for tap dancing at the age of 5, which continued to grow throughout her life. Those who knew her described her as a joyful person to be around, with a goofy and bubbly personality that could light up a room. Julie Kibushi was known for her kindness and willingness to go out of her way to help others. Julie Kibushi's life was a balance between her Japanese heritage and her independent American spirit. She had recently graduated from the Orange County School of the Arts and was pursuing a degree in fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she befriended 26-year-old Sam Herr and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know, her kindness would ultimately lead to her tragic demise. The police investigation into Julie Kibushi's murder was underway. Detectives meticulously examined the crime scene, searching for clues that would reveal the truth about her final moments. Their attention turned to Sam Herr, as Julie Kibushi's body was found in his apartment. His sudden disappearance further raised suspicions. With evidence pointing to Sam Herr's involvement, investigators decided to take a closer look at him. Detectives suspected that Sam Herr had committed the crime in a moment of passion and then fled. This theory was supported by the fact that Sam Herr was nowhere to be found after the murder of Julie Kibushi in his apartment. The discovery of text messages from Sam Herr's number on Julie Kibushi's phone further fueled their suspicions. Initially, the messages seemed innocuous, with Sam Herr sending Julie Kibushi a text at 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, telling her he would help a friend and then visit his parents. However, just 2 hours later, his messages took a drastic turn, as he frantically asked Julie Kibushi to come to his apartment. However, investigators interpreted these messages as evidence of Sam Herr's guilt, arguing that he had planned for Julie Kibushi to visit his apartment, which ultimately led to the murder. The disappearance of several key items from the apartment hinted at Sam Herr's possible flight. His passport and car were both missing, leading investigators to a straightforward conclusion: Sam Herr was on the run, and likely the prime suspect in the crime. As the investigation continued, the Costa Mesa police tracked Sam Herr's cell phone and credit card activity to pinpoint his location. They discovered that his credit card had been used for 4 ATM withdrawals and a purchase at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. Police anticipated that Sam Herr would appear in the surveillance footage of the ATM. However, when the bank provided the footage, the police were shocked to see a teenager wearing a hoodie, not Sam Herr, withdrawing money from his account. Neither the police nor Sam Herr's parents could identify the mysterious boy. Investigators believed he was probably helping Sam Herr escape or hide. In either case, the Costa Mesa police were determined to find him. On May 26, 2010, they discovered that his credit card had been used for another pizza delivery, and they began tracing the delivery driver. Police went to an address provided by a tipster, expecting to catch Sam Herr, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freilich and his friends. Although initially suspected, authorities quickly cleared Wesley's name. However, they discovered that he possessed Sam Herr's credit card. Wesley told investigators a surprising story. He had been given the credit card by Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor who had met Wesley through community theater. Daniel Wozniak claimed to be a bail bondsman and said he needed help collecting money from Sam Herr. Believing Wozniak's story, Wesley agreed to withdraw cash using the credit card, unaware of the true circumstances. A total of $1,900 was withdrawn from the account, sparking further investigation. The name Daniel Wozniak was familiar to investigators, who had previously found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Sam Hare's apartment. This raised several questions. Who was Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Sam Hare? Was he involved in helping Sam Hare escape, or was he a more sinister accomplice to the murder? These questions needed to be answered. To understand Daniel Wozniak's potential role, investigators looked into his background. Born on March 23, 1984, Daniel Wozniak was the youngest of 3 brothers. Due to his parents' demanding work schedules, he spent a significant amount of time with his grandparents after school. Daniel Wozniak grew up in a privileged household and was accustomed to luxury. Daniel Wozniak's journey to becoming an actor began in his early 20s. Despite struggling to hold down a job and often having to move to low-paying positions, his passion for acting and singing in musicals kept him going. It was during this time that he met his future wife, a fellow actress, and they eventually got married. However, their happiness was short-lived. On May 26, 2010, the day of Daniel Wozniak's bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California, police arrived with an arrest warrant. This unexpected turn of events linked Daniel Wozniak to the murder of Julie Kibushi, as it turned out that Sam Hare, the suspected killer, lived in the same apartment complex as Daniel Wozniak. Authorities believed that Daniel Wozniak may have helped Sam Hare escape or hide, leading them to assume he was involved in the crime. Police arrested and questioned Daniel Wozniak. Initially, during interrogation, Daniel Wozniak claimed that his only wrongdoing was credit card fraud and that he had covered for his friend Sam Hare. He explained to investigators that he, Sam Hare, and Wesley had planned to withdraw all of his money from the bank and then report the credit cards as stolen. Daniel Wozniak claims he dropped Sam Hare off at a local mall. Detectives remained skeptical, however, believing that Daniel Wozniak was still protecting Sam Hare and had more to do with Julie Kibushi's murder than he had let on. In an effort to uncover the truth, police asked Wozniak to provide a DNA sample, a request that made him nervous. Detectives noticed Daniel Wozniak's nervous behavior when questioned about his DNA being found at Sam Hare's apartment, despite his attempts to act nonchalant. As the pressure mounted, he began to alter his story repeatedly. Eventually, Daniel Wozniak cracked and admitted he knew about Julie Kibushi's murder and had helped the perpetrator escape. However, when reminded that his DNA had been collected, he insisted it would not match any evidence found on Julie Kibushi's body, clinging to the claim of his innocence. Just as detectives were expecting Daniel Wozniak to reveal more information, he abruptly ended the interview. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, informed Daniel Wozniak that he would be arrested as an accessory to murder if he didn't provide a full account of his involvement. Daniel Wozniak, who was scheduled to get married in just 48 hours, was caught between revealing the truth and avoiding arrest, which would ruin his wedding plans. Under intense questioning, Daniel Wozniak's story began to unravel. Detectives sensed his weakness and accelerated the process by falsely claiming that DNA evidence linked him to Julie Kibushi's body. They misled him, as DNA test results would not be available for weeks. Instead of disputing the claim, Daniel Wozniak surprisingly explained that his DNA would be on Julie Kibushi's body because he was near her. This inconsistent response raised suspicions. As Daniel Wozniak's lies continued to crumble, he made a stunning revelation, which was particularly alarming to detectives because they had initially observed only one gunshot wound at the crime scene. It wasn't until the autopsy was performed that a second gunshot wound was discovered, casting further doubt on Daniel Wozniak's credibility. Daniel Wozniak's confession implicated him as an accomplice to the murder, allowing investigators to formally detain him. However, detectives still needed to locate Sam Hare, and Daniel Wozniak refused to cooperate. Despite being in custody, Daniel Wozniak made a phone call to his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Unbeknownst to Daniel Wozniak, the conversation was being recorded, which would eventually ensnare him in his own deceit. Rachel decided to prioritize her freedom over her relationship and informed Daniel Wozniak that she would share more information with the detectives. Realizing he needed to act swiftly, Daniel Wozniak became frantic and sought to negotiate a deal with the detectives, a reversal of his stance just hours earlier. Daniel Wozniak revealed a shocking account to the detectives, detailing his sinister murder plan. It began with a seemingly innocuous request to a friend, Sam Herr, whom he considered trustworthy. On May 21, 2010, Daniel Wozniak asked Sam Herr to help him move boxes at the Los Alamitos Theater attic, located on a local military base. Sam Herr was initially unaware of what had happened. When he realized he had been shot, he begged Daniel Wozniak for help. However, Daniel Wozniak showed no mercy. Without hesitation, he reloaded the gun and shot Sam Herr a second time, killing him instantly. The suspect brutally murdered Sam Herr and didn't stop there. He then used Sam Herr's phone to text Julie Kibushi, luring her to Sam Herr's apartment. He left Sam Herr's body in the attic later that night. The suspect snuck into Sam Herr's apartment, where Julie Kibushi had fallen into his trap. He then shot Julie Kibushi twice in the head. Daniel Wozniak altered the crime scene to make people think Sam Herr was the culprit, and he fled after attacking and killing Julie Kibushi. However, Daniel Wozniak realized that he still had to hide Sam Herr's body. Daniel Wozniak went back to the attic and cut off Sam Herr's hands and head to make it harder to identify the body. He then got rid of these body parts in a nearby park. Despite his gruesome actions, Daniel Wozniak appeared to be unaffected and returned to the theater, where he was seen laughing and joking with others in several photos taken at cast parties, which were later found by detectives. The underlying motive for the murders was surprisingly straightforward: money. Daniel Wozniak's financial struggles were well documented, with 2 months of unpaid rent threatening his eviction and no means to fund the lavish wedding and honeymoon he had planned. However, his situation changed dramatically when he discovered that Sam Herr had $62,000 in savings from his military service. This revelation sparked a sinister plan, and Daniel Wozniak brutally murdered 2 innocent people in cold blood, all to fund his own extravagant celebrations. The bag containing crucial evidence against Daniel Wozniak was meant to be disposed of by his brother Tim, but Tim threw it over their parents' fence instead. The bag held incriminating items like bloody clothing, a weapon, and victim Sam Herr's records and passport, all with Daniel's DNA. This treasure trove of evidence helped secure a quick conviction, with Daniel found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on December 16, 2015. On January 11, 2016, the jury in Daniel Wozniak's trial recommended the death penalty after only 1 hour of deliberation, a remarkably short time for such a serious decision. The judge later sentenced Daniel Wozniak to death on September 23, 2016. Years after the trial, detectives discovered that Rachel Buffett, Daniel Wozniak's former fiancée, had been aware of the murder plots and had misled investigators. Despite her denials, Rachel Buffett was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact for allegedly lying to the police on multiple occasions. On September 12, 2018, Rachel Buffett was found guilty of 2 serious charges, which carried a maximum sentence of 44 months in prison. As a result, she received a 32-month prison sentence on November 8, 2018. She was eventually released in 2019. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Anna Rybkina. Anna Rybkina, a 27-year-old woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, she was a bright and ambitious individual from a good family. Her outlook on life was optimistic, and she yearned for love. Anna dreamed of getting married, starting a family, and building a home. Those who knew her remembered her infectious sense of humor and delightful personality. However, in 2016, Anna's world was turned upside down when her high school sweetheart ended their relationship of 7 years. Despite her heartbreak, she was determined to find true love and live a happy, fulfilling life. Anna decided to try online dating and signed up for several websites. She quickly matched with a man named William Hargrove on a Russian dating site. William, a 26-year-old from Oregon. He showered her with kindness and compliments, making an effort to be present for her despite the distance between them. People who know William describe him as a charismatic and humorous person. As Anna and William's online relationship progressed, they spoke every day and became more serious over the course of a few months. They shared many common interests, and Anna and William got along very well. William was the sweetest, he kept sending her flowers. Soon, they started talking about meeting in person. The chemistry was already there over the cell phone. Anna and William decided to meet in person, taking their months-long relationship one step further. In December 2016, Anna booked a flight to visit William in Oregon. However, there was a mix-up. Anna had accidentally booked a ticket to Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. By the time the mistake was discovered, Anna had already arrived in Maine. Determined to spend the Christmas holidays with William, Anna rebooked her flight and arrived in Oregon just in time. William was there to greet her at the airport. Over the next 10 days, they experienced the ultimate festive romance. William also introduced Anna to his friends. And they shared a magical New Year's Eve countdown together, sealing their connection with a romantic kiss at midnight. At the end of Anna's 10-day visit, William proposed to her with his grandmother's emerald ring, and she accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was already involved with someone else, his landlord, Michelle Chavez. Michelle was a 33-year-old married woman with 2 kids, but that didn't stop her and William's romantic relationship, which had been going on for over a year. When Anna visited William, she met Michelle, who was introduced to her as William's landlord, unaware of the true nature of their relationship. Michelle seemed to be aware of William's intentions to propose to Anna, but she didn't reveal their secret, possibly because she believed William would never leave her. Anna had returned to Russia after getting engaged to William and posted a picture of her ring on Facebook. The post appeared on Michelle's homepage, revealing the shocking news. Michelle was not only angry that her boyfriend, William, was engaged to another woman, but Michelle had also planned to leave her husband for him. In fact, Michelle had already taken off her wedding ring and given it to William as a symbol of her commitment. What Michelle didn't know was that William had given Anna the same ring that Michelle had given him. When Michelle confronted William about the engagement, he downplayed the situation, claiming that Anna meant nothing to him and that he would break off the engagement. However, on March 1, 2017, Anna returned to Oregon, ready to start her new life with William, bringing her wedding dress and a suitcase with her. She had even quit her job, expecting to be with William forever. Michelle was unhappy about the situation. Anna's mother, Yelena, had previously expressed concerns about her daughter moving to a new country for a man she barely knew. Yelena thought Anna was moving too quickly, but Anna insisted she was in love and didn't see the need to wait. Yelena eventually gave her blessing. However, Michelle was furious when she realized Anna's visit was actually a permanent move. She asked William to find a new place to live, as she didn't want the engaged couple staying with her. William agreed and rented an apartment for himself and Anna. Despite this, William continued to secretly visit Michelle, reassuring her of his commitment to her and downplaying his relationship with Anna. Michelle grew increasingly worried about how serious Anna and William's relationship was becoming, so she decided to take action. She contacted Anna on Facebook and revealed everything that had been going on behind her back. Anna shared with William everything Michelle had told her, but he dismissed it as mere jealousy from an ex-girlfriend. Anna trusted William's explanation and decided to move forward with their wedding plans. They had set a date of March 23rd to get married by the sea. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, but the officiant failed to arrive. After a long wait, they returned home. According to William, the officiant was ill, and Anna believed him. However, William had been clear about his feelings. He didn't love Anna and saw her as unimportant. Despite this, Anna refused to accept the reality of the situation. Michelle was exhausted with the situation. On April 15th, she had reached her limit and told William he had to make a decision, her or Anna. Michelle made it clear that she wouldn't tolerate him leading a double life any longer. Michelle told William that if Anna wasn't out of the picture by Thursday, April 20th, she would take drastic action. When she said she would build a snowman, Michelle meant that she would harm or kill Anna and hide the body in a remote, cold location where it would never be found. After her conversation with William, Michelle couldn't reach him. She assumed he had chosen Anna and left him several voicemails to express her feelings. However, the next day, Sunday, April 16th, William called Michelle and told her that he was now single. He explained that he and Anna had broken up and she was returning to Russia. It was Easter Sunday, and Michelle had been attending a family gathering. However, Michelle left her family's celebration to meet William. They of them reconnected and reaffirmed their relationship by being intimate in William's car. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in a forest, but the investigators had no idea who she was. She didn't have any identification on her and had only been in the state for about a month, making it difficult to start the investigation. There was no murder weapon at the scene, but among the trash scattered around her body was a clear plastic bag. Inside the bag, detectives found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a used KFC chicken wrapper. The KFC receipt turned out to be a crucial piece of evidence. The receipt contained the date, time stamp, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas, the owner of the debit card. Kevin, it turned out, was a close friend of William's. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he and William were very close. Kevin also mentioned that he and William had a tradition of going to KFC for lunch every Friday. The receipt was from a purchase made about a week before William was questioned by the police. During the questioning, the police mentioned that they had found garbage from KFC in the trash, which they believed was from the previous week. William acknowledged that he and Kevin regularly went to KFC on Fridays. It was revealed that Kevin had paid for his meal with a credit card, while William had paid in cash. Kevin had previously told the police about William's complicated relationship situation, which had only come to light during the investigation into Anna's death. Kevin also mentioned that William had borrowed his shotgun, but had not returned it. According to Kevin, William had said he wanted to borrow the shotgun to go to the woods and relieve some stress. After hearing Kevin's statement, the police began to focus their attention on William and Michelle. From the day Anna died, William had been acting strangely and suspiciously. Following the death of his fiancée, Mr. William Hargrove was witnessed displaying unusual behavior. He withdrew funds from her bank account and spent them on items such as cigars and Star Wars Legos. He justified these purchases to his friend Kevin by saying he was trying to alleviate his grief. However, this behavior was compounded and Mr. Hargrove began researching time travel, even going so far as to offer his soul in exchange for the opportunity to travel back in time. When asked why he wanted to travel back in time, Mr. Hargrove explained that he wanted to return to April 16th to prevent his friend from making a mistake. However, this claim appears dubious, as on the same date, Mr. Hargrove was recorded crying in the arms of a store employee, claiming his girlfriend had left him. This raises doubts about the sincerity of his claim, particularly as he had been living with Michelle, despite her not being his anymore. William was taken into custody by the police and questioned. Initially, They asked him about his whereabouts on April 16. William stated that he had gone for a drive with Michelle. However, when questioned about his relationship with Anna, William claimed they were just acquaintances, having met while walking in downtown Corvallis. He told the police that they had gone on 2 dates, but he had made it clear to her that he wasn't interested in pursuing a romantic relationship. According to William, he last saw Anna in mid-March. He also mentioned that Anna had mistakenly posted about their engagement on Facebook, which caused tension with his actual partner, Michelle. The police then asked William about the trash found near the area where his acquaintance, Anna, was last seen. William admitted to littering, but claimed that he had disposed of his trash, including KFC waste and a trash can. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators who questioned William Hargrove, revealed that trash that implicated him had been found near Anna's body. Initially, William pretended to be shocked and distressed upon hearing this. However, his demeanor quickly changed and he requested a lawyer. Despite denying any involvement, William was arrested on April 19, 2 days after the body of Anna Rybkina was discovered. Following William's arrest, Michelle was also brought in for questioning. When questioned about her whereabouts on April 16, Michelle provided a rehearsed alibi, stating that she and William spent the day driving together after he picked her up from her mother's house. However, her story changed later as she admitted to lying initially. She then claimed that William had planned to call and pick her up, but never followed through. During the interrogation, the police revealed shocking information to Michelle. Her boyfriend of a year and a half was now in custody for murder. Her initial reaction was surprisingly calm, but when the investigator pointed out her unusual reaction, Michelle's emotions finally surfaced. William was facing serious charges, including murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft. His trial began in October 2019, nearly a year after his indictment in June 2018. The prosecution was pushing for the maximum penalty, presenting a strong case against William with evidence and a clear motive. However, the defense argued that William was innocent and that Michelle, his scorned lover, was the real culprit. Evidence suggested that William had a motive to commit the crime, as he was being pressured by another lover to choose between Anna and Michelle. Additionally, records showed that William and Anna had driven together in the same car on the day of the murder. Furthermore, cell phone records placed William near the crime scene at 4:30 p.m. on the day of the murder, near Logging Road. The gun used to kill Anna was discovered in William's car, with only his fingerprints on it. William was using Anna's money to go shopping and pay his car insurance. He was even caught withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. According to the prosecution, William had driven Anna to a secluded forest area, where he killed her with his shotgun in a deliberate and calculated manner. The motive, they argued, was that William had to choose between Anna and Michelle, and he chose to eliminate Anna. Michelle explained how she met William and the nature of their relationship. She was a late-night cab driver, and her husband was a university instructor. However, their marriage was loveless. One evening, she met William at the bar where he worked. She began a romantic relationship with him. Over time, they grew extremely close, and William even rented a room in her house to be nearer to her. Michelle and William had an open relationship. When Anna first appeared, Michelle was not worried. However, when Anna visited more often, Michelle felt threatened, especially when she saw her wedding ring on Anna's finger. Michelle forced William to choose between her or Anna, but she insisted that she had nothing to do with William's actions that hurt Anna. She stressed that she never intended for Anna to be hurt or worse, killed. Michelle addressed the defense's allegations against her. She explained that the "building a snowman" threat was a joke, albeit an extreme one. She admitted that her cell phone was found in the forest, but claimed that William had driven her there without her knowledge of his intentions. Finally, Michelle stated that William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned by authorities, and she had kept it for him because he was her partner. After nearly a month of court appearances, the judge requested a verdict from the jury. Deliberations took under 3 hours, and ultimately, the defense was unable to link Michelle to Anna's death. Unlike William, Michelle had no forensic evidence tying her to the crime scene or the weapon. Multiple witnesses corroborated her alibi, confirming that she was at her mother's house celebrating Easter at the time of the incident. William pleaded not guilty, but due to overwhelming evidence, he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. His lawyer indicated that they would file an appeal. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Zara Alina. Zara Alina was born in England in the winter of 1986. As the eldest of 5 children, Zara's birth held great significance, symbolizing her mother's aspirations for a better future. Additionally, she was the first granddaughter of Radha Parvin, a distinction that earned her special respect and status within the family. Growing up, Zara was doted on by her relatives and raised in a multi-generational household. Despite their financial struggles, Zara's parents prioritized her education, believing it would provide her with a good life. Zara's family had big plans for her future, but their hopes were overshadowed by the dangers and difficulties that surrounded them, putting Zara's safety at risk. Zara had an unrelenting passion and thirst for life from a very young age. This led her to develop a love for tap dancing, a form of self-expression where each step brought out a rhythm that evoked a sense of harmony. Additionally, and swimming, which gave her a sense of freedom from the monotony of daily life. Her exquisite style and artistic approach to fashion allowed her to express her dreams through her outfits. However, these pursuits were just the beginning of her journey. Her first experience with skating ignited a new sense of freedom within her. Skating evolved into more than just a hobby for her. It became a powerful outlet for self-expression, allowing her to connect with her deepest emotions and inner self. Those close to Zara were unsurprised when she shared her aspiration to become a lawyer, driven by a desire to protect and support others. Her warm personality spread happiness and positivity, making those around her feel uplifted and inspired. Zara's eyes sparkled, and her gaze was captivating. Her curly black hair added to her striking appearance. She has a magnetic appeal, combining qualities such as passion, kindness, and courage, along with undeniable charm. As a teenager, she had the chance to explore England, visiting museums and galleries that fueled her interest in art and culture. Her travels showcased independence and unrelenting passion for knowledge and discovery. Following her initial trips, she later traveled to other parts of Europe. These adventures show that she inherited her family's passion for discovery and exploration of new things. Zara's aunt, Farah, was a significant influence on her. Unlike many others who chose to settle in the UK, Farah settled in Portugal. What captivated Zara was her aunt's work as a psychotherapist, particularly her involvement with women's organizations. As a result, Zara made it a point to visit her aunt on multiple occasions. Zara began turning her dreams into a reality when she earned admission to the University of Westminster immediately after high school graduation. She dedicated herself to pursuing her objectives, all while taking care of her mother and grandmother at the same time. Although she was short, she had endless energy and a deeply passionate personality. Zara is a compassionate person who has positively impacted the lives of many refugees forced to flee their homes due to conflict, she using her influence to speak out about their stories. She also volunteered at community canteens, aiding the homeless. Zara has a remarkable talent for understanding what others need, and she always makes time for them a priority in her busy schedule. Her easygoing personality made her a delight to be around. She frequently visited her aunt, Smee Naz, who lived nearby, often seeking her help with exam preparation, but their study sessions inevitably turned into laughter-filled moments. Those who knew Zara remember that she brought happiness wherever she went. Moreover, she was diligent, covering her own expenses and providing support to her family. Zara was a familiar face at a local clothing store, where she worked and interacted with everyone in the community, from teenagers to the elderly. Her kindness and willingness to help others were notable traits. Despite being talkative, she was a good listener and extended her generosity to all living beings, especially cats. She would often spend her own money to care for stray cats, taking them to the vet or convincing neighbors to adopt them. Zara's friend, Sanji Naira, described her as radiant and thought that her most significant gift was her ability to share optimism with others. Whenever Sanji was down, he would turn to Zara for help. Zara had a special person in her life, Carissa Peters, who was more than just a friend. They formed a strong bond as they fought together for justice and women's rights, a common goal that forged a lasting friendship despite life's obstacles. They felt a strong sense of comfort and familiarity in each other's homes and maintained a daily phone routine, using this time to share news, discuss their thoughts, and make plans for the future. After passing her exams and completing her law internship in 2002, Zara had the opportunity to work at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a significant step toward realizing her dream of becoming a full-fledged lawyer. To achieve this, Zara persevered with her work despite facing many difficulties, including worries from her mother and grandmother, as well as financial struggles. This achievement was significant for her and for the people who believed in, supported her through the challenges she faced on her path to a better life. On her first day at the new job, Zara felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. She shared a smiley selfie with friends and family, as if announcing the start of a new chapter in her life to the world. This new job was the final piece in the puzzle of her dreams, a culmination of years of hard work. Although being an administrator might seem like a secondary role to some, it was a significant milestone for Zara. At 35 years old, she entered a new phase of her life, which sparked in her a sense of excitement and determination that filled her with a clear direction and goal. This wasn't just another working day. It marked the beginning of a new era in her life, one where she felt truly fulfilled and happy. The new job boosted Zara's confidence, and she felt it was time to start her own family. She envisioned her children living happy, protected lives filled with love and harmony. With each passing day, Zara saw herself moving closer to her dream of having a family. Her life was busy with work, volunteering, friends, and support from her mother and grandmother, who shared her home and provided care when needed. Despite her packed schedule, Zara enjoyed walking and valued her freedom of movement. She didn't let small things hold her back and would often carry a spare pair of shoes in her bag to change into sneakers when needed. Zara believed that women should be able to move freely without any obstacles or restrictions. However, a man named Jordan McSweeney, who lived nearby, posed a threat to Zara's freedom. Jordan was a few years younger than Zara, and his origins were unknown. One Saturday evening, after the sun had set, Zara was on her way to meet a friend. Despite not being in the mood, but she chose not to cancel, honoring her commitment. Zara was recognized for being extremely reliable and keeping her commitments, especially to her friends. Before leaving, she called Aunt Farah, but this time, a hint of anxiety crept into her voice. Aunt Farah cautioned Zara to be careful, and although she wasn't venturing far from home, the evening atmosphere felt unusual and unpredictable. Zara assured herself that she was familiar with every part of the city and that people knew who she was. Nevertheless, something about this evening unsettled her, making her heart beat faster, and she decided to exercise extra caution. Zara met her friend at the Ilford Big Spoon, a local bar on London's West End, at the scheduled time. Ilford in London is a vibrant and culturally diverse neighborhood ideal for evening meals and socializing. One Saturday evening, Zara and her friend came to this area. They then headed to another bar, where Zara had a couple of glasses of water. Meanwhile, Jordan was at a nearby nightclub, having one drink after another. As he drank, an idea formed in his mind, and he decided to act on it. He was determined to find a woman to attack that night. Security cameras captured Jordan's behavior at the club's entrance, where he would hug and try to kiss women without their consent. He was particularly aggressive with one employee, despite her clear discomfort. Eventually, he was kicked out of the club around 11 p.m., and his behavior was recorded on camera. After leaving the club, cameras continued to capture Jordan's actions as he walked down Romford Street towards the park. As Jordan walked, he spotted a woman and began to follow her. Jordan approached her, and she tried to avoid him by entering a store. However, Jordan waited for her outside, and when she left the store, he followed her again. He then crossed the street, keeping her in sight. When the woman entered her house, Jordan was forced to continue on his way. According to security footage, around 2 a.m. on Cranbrook Street, Jordan noticed another woman approaching him. Suddenly, Jordan quickened his pace, approaching a woman. However, two passing witnesses noticed his suspicious behavior, which was captured on video. Despite this, the woman managed to return home safely, leaving Jordan surprised and frustrated. He then returned to Cranbrook Street, having been unsuccessful. Around the same time, Zara and her friend decided to leave the bar and head home. It was 2 a.m. Her friend took a taxi, but Zara chose to walk, given the short distance and pleasant weather. As they parted ways, Zara began walking down Cranbrook Street, a residential area just a 10-minute walk from her house. It was then that Jordan spotted her. According to Chief Inspector Dave Williams, Jordan had a clear intention that night to attack a woman, regardless of the location. Cranbrook Street remained busy, even in the early hours, with a steady flow of traffic. Jordan had a history of offenses dating back to 2006 to 2009, for which he was sentenced in a Kent juvenile court at the age of 13. In August 2010, at the age of 17, he was found guilty of assaulting a girl, causing her to suffer a swollen eye. He received a 4-month detention and correction period as a result. 11 years after his initial offense, Jordan committed another crime against a woman, resulting in a 3-year ban from approaching her, either directly or indirectly. By 2010, he had a total of 28 convictions for 69 different offenses. These offenses included theft, assault on both police officers and the general public, motor vehicle theft, traffic infractions, committing crimes while out on bail, and shoplifting. Jordan used a social media platform to boast about his extensive collection of weapons and glorify a life of crime. He shared various photos and quotes, as well as fake images claiming the FBI was searching for him. After being imprisoned for crimes including criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and carrying a bladed weapon, Jordan was released on parole on June 17, 2022. One of the conditions of his parole was to regularly meet with his assigned parole officer. Following his release, Jordan resided in a van on St. Valentine Street, located in a 130-acre park in the Gun Hill area of London's Redbridge district, the largest green space in the region. Jordan broke all the rules of his parole and missed 2 scheduled meetings with his parole officer. As a result, the authorities decided not to show him any mercy. On June 22, 2022, the parole service started the process to send Jordan back to prison, but they didn't notify the police until 2 days later. On the morning of Saturday, June 25, 2022, police went to his mother's house to arrest him, only to find he was not there. In the early hours of June 26, 2022, a horrific crime occurred in Ilford. Zara was discovered on the sidewalk, displaying signs of abuse, with her belongings scattered around her. Her body showed evidence of severe injuries, her clothes were torn. and her eyes indicated a desperate struggle for survival. A passerby immediately recognized the gravity of the situation and began administering chest compressions and CPR in an attempt to save Zara's life. Despite the efforts of passers-by and emergency medical responders, Zara's injuries proved too severe. She fought for her life but ultimately passing away at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. At approximately 11 a.m., security cameras in the park captured Jordan disposing of evidence, including his clothes, with an air of indifference and calmness. This behavior suggested that the act of violence was premeditated rather than random. The police swiftly responded and visited Zara's grandmother, asking her to identify her granddaughter from video footage taken at the bar. Upon confirmation of Zara's identity, the police informed her grandmother about the incident. Zara's uncle Qasim then contacted other family members, including Aunt Farah in Portugal, to break the news. Farah recalled receiving the distressing call on Saturday night, which prompted her to immediately travel to London. The family was deeply shocked and struggling to cope with the intense sadness of Zara's passing. Concurrently, detectives initiated an investigation in the area where Zara's body was found. They began by gathering footage from surveillance cameras to reconstruct the attacker's movements. The combination of video evidence and bloody fingerprints discovered near the crime scene enabled the identification of Jordan as the primary suspect. Utilizing a video surveillance system, the police tracked Jordan's location and obtained images of him. Inspector Dave dispatched an officer to Gun Hill to verify if anyone recognized Jordan. The operation yielded swift results, as Jordan was found sleeping in his van shortly thereafter. The authorities immediately arrested Jordan, who was found with blood-stained clothes and shoes that he was trying to dispose of. Despite lengthy interrogations, he refused to speak or reveal any information about himself. Meanwhile, new video footage emerged, allowing police to piece together the incident surrounding the crime. The incident led parole officer Justin Russell to criticize the handling of Jordan's case, highlighting a series of errors. Jordan has a criminal history dating back to the age of 16 and has been in prison several times, making him a subject at high risk of committing a crime. After being released from detention, he missed several scheduled supervision appointments. Authorities failed to take prompt action to return him to prison. Zara's family described the last few days as incredibly shocking, acknowledging that their loss was irreparable. However, in the face of such grief, they were touched by the warmth and kindness people have shown. The family faced a significant amount of work and needed to find the strength to cope. Aunt Farah took charge of communicating with the media and meeting with the police. Even though they were dealing with their own shock and grief, the family understood that taking control of the situation was crucial to protect Zara from possible accusations by some media outlets. A preliminary hearing for the Jordan case occurred on July 1, 2022. A subsequent hearing was scheduled for September 30, 2022, to prepare testimonies for the trial. However, the trial was postponed because Jordan did not appear on the scheduled day. On July 2, a memorial service was held for Zara, organized by her family. The service took place along the route Zara would have taken home, representing her final, unfinished journey. Many attendees wore white to symbolize a silent walk. Over 120 organizations that specialize in supporting women attended, showing solidarity in the fight against violence. These organizations collaborated with Zara Alina's family and publicly pushed for justice and accountability. They stressed that it's crucial to address violence against women and stopping perpetrators from committing such acts. During a preliminary hearing at East London Court in Walthamstow, crime scene investigator Nadia Persat testified. She stated that local police officers could have done more to locate Jordan before he attacked Zara. Persat believes the jury should investigate this matter further. On November 16, 2022, Jordan failed to appear at the hearing, despite being informed that his attendance was mandatory. As a result, a video call was arranged, during which he pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow argued that Jordan would be unfit for bail, and Judge Chima Grave agreed. The judge postponed the verdict until December 14th of the same year. However, as that date approached, Jordan failed to appear in court. Despite his absence, Jordan was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years for the murder of Zara Alina. Jordan and his representatives appealed the sentence, which was subsequently reduced to 33 years in prison. The judge took into account that Zara was unconscious at the time of her death and therefore did not experience any suffering, which was a key factor in the decision to reduce the sentence. For months after the incident, it was revealed that Jordan had a personal relationship with a 32-year-old woman who worked at the Belmarsh Correctional Facility in South London. The woman, who was not a direct employee of the prison services but worked at the facility, was arrested and investigated for suspected misconduct in a public office. Zara Alina's family still fondly remembers her with love and pride. Her aunt, Farah, continues to advocate against violence towards women and girls. In March 2023, Farah participated in a march organized by various groups to raise awareness about the issue.